Have you ever gotten home and set your keys down and realized the conversation was over, but somehow you're still having it? I've had days like that. Hello and welcome to Thrive Within. I'm your host, Mark Bucksell, the life coach, educator, and someone who's passionate about helping you live more fully, honestly, and aligned with who you really are. This podcast is your space for real talk and focused coaching on things like confidence, purpose, boundaries, self-doubt, and personal growth. So whether you're on a walk, taking a break, or just giving your brain a moment to breathe, I am so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Have you ever gotten home, sit down your keys, and you realize you're exhausted? Not because of your schedule, not because you just worked 12 hours, but because of one 5-minute conversation is still following you. Your body made it home, but your mind didn't. Maybe you replayed it 10 times already. You hear the same words, you notice the same pause, you wonder if their tone meant something. You start asking yourself questions that just don't seem to have answers. Did I say something wrong? Why were they so quiet? Should I have explained myself better? What's interesting is the other person may have gone on with the rest of their day, but somehow you're still carrying the conversation. I've had days like that. Days where that one small interaction followed me through the grocery store, through mowing the lawn, even into bed that night. Well, after a while, I caught myself thinking, why can't I let it go? You know, the funny thing is, I don't think I was trying to win the conversation anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I was right. I just wanted it to make sense. I wanted everything to fit together. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you don't get all the pieces, at least not right away. I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble. We get tired of waiting. We get uncomfortable not knowing. So without even realizing it, our minds quietly finish the story for us. The problem is, our minds don't always get the right ending. Maybe you've wondered that too. I've noticed something over the years. Some conversations end when they end. Others don't. They quietly follow us home. And what's interesting is they usually aren't the biggest conversations. Sometimes they're surprisingly ordinary. A look, a pause, a shorter text, someone who seemed distracted. Something just feels unfinished. Our minds don't like unfinished stories, so they naturally begin to finish them. Maybe they're upset. Maybe I disappointed them. Or maybe I should have handled that differently. If you ever found yourself replaying the same conversation while brushing your teeth, standing in the shower, or laying awake trying to fall asleep, you're not strange. You're human. I've even caught myself thinking, why does everyone else seem to be able to move on while I'm still thinking about this? And I've started realizing something. I don't think our minds are trying to torture us. I think they're trying to protect us. They want certainty. They want resolution. The problem is, sometimes certainty simply isn't available yet. And if we're not careful, we'll mistake a guess for the truth. Once I started realizing that, I stopped getting angry at myself for doing it. It doesn't mean I enjoy it. I don't, but it did help me stop treating myself like something was wrong with me. Maybe this isn't a flaw. Maybe it's just part of being human. The trick is learning not to believe every story your mind tells you before reality has a chance to speak. I remember mowing the lawn on one Saturday afternoon. Nothing unusual had happened. Halfway through the yard, I suddenly realized I've been replaying the same conversation for almost the entire time. The mower kept moving, the grass kept getting shorter, but mentally, I hadn't been in my yard for 45 minutes. I was still trying to figure out what someone meant. Eventually, I kind of laughed at myself, not because it was funny, but because I realized I've been trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. That didn't mean nothing was wrong. Sometimes your instincts are right. Sometimes another conversation really is needed. But in the moment, I honestly didn't know. Yet, I've been carrying it as though I did. That afternoon has stayed with me, not because it changed my life, but because it quietly showed me how much energy I could spend trying to answer questions that reality hasn't answered yet. I still think about that afternoon sometimes, not because mowing the lawn was some life changing experience, it wasn't, but it made me realize how easy it is to miss something that's happening right in front of us. Because mentally, we're somewhere we've already left. I wonder how many conversations with people we love, how many sunsets, how many ordinary Sundays I've only been halfway present for because I was still trying to solve yesterday. You can't get time back, and that's what finally made me stop and pay attention. A few years ago, after class, a student was waiting behind, and we talked for a few minutes, and I answered his questions, said goodbye, and that was it. And so, or at least that's what I thought. A few weeks later, he told me, I almost didn't come back because I thought you were frustrated with me that day. I remember looking at him thinking, really? I wasn't frustrated at all. I wasn't really thinking about, I was thinking about setting up the next lab. And that conversation has stayed with me ever since because it reminded me on how two people can leave the same moment carrying completely different stories. One leaves thinking, that was a good conversation. The other leaves wondering, did I do something wrong? We were simply experiencing the same moment through two different lenses or two different stories. And that made me wonder how many stories I've written about other people that never actually happened. And I have a feeling I'm probably not the only one who's done that. A while back, I started asking myself one question whenever I noticed a conversation following me around. Nothing complicated, just this. Do I know that's true? Not can I prove myself wrong, not should I ignore my feelings, just do I actually know? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the question reminds me I really do need another conversation. And sometimes my instincts are trying to get my attention. And I've learned not to ignore that. But honestly, more often than not, the answer is I don't know yet. And something interesting happens when I admit that. My shoulders relax. I stop trying to solve something that just can't be solved yet. Because here's what I've realized: not knowing and being wrong aren't the same thing. Sometimes we act like they are. Sometimes we feel uncomfortable not having an answer. So we make one up, not on purpose. Minds just don't like unfinished stories. But reality doesn't always work on our timetable. Sometimes the answer shows up tomorrow, sometimes next week, sometimes after another honest conversation. And I've started realizing I'm a whole lot more peaceful when I stop demanding certainty before certainty actually exists. It's kind of funny. Nothing outside of me has changed. The conversation is still over. The other person still hasn't called. The text still hasn't come in. The situation is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is what I'm demanding from it. So, can I invite you to try something this week? The next time you notice yourself replaying a conversation, don't immediately try to solve it. Just pause. Take one slow breath and quietly ask yourself, do I know that's true? That's it. One question. The answer is yes. Maybe it's time to have another conversation. If the answer is, I don't know, then maybe, just maybe, you can let reality have a little bit more time before your imagination finishes the story. This isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's not about ignoring your instincts. It's about giving reality the opportunity to speak before we decide we've already heard everything it has to say. I found that question helpful. Maybe you will too. Maybe there's a conversation following you today. Maybe it happened at work. Maybe it happened at home. Or maybe even happened years ago. Maybe before you press play on this episode, your mind is already replaying something. And if that's where you are, I get it. I've been there. Truthfully, I'll probably be there again. But I'm still working on that too. But I've noticed something. The conversations that used to follow me around for days, I don't anymore. Not because life changed, but because I noticed what's happening sooner. I catch myself. I ask one question, and a lot of times that's enough to interrupt the story before it grows into something bigger than it already is. And I've been thinking about something. I don't think peace always comes from finally figuring out what somebody meant. Sometimes peace comes from finally being okay with saying, I just don't know yet. And maybe that's enough for today. Thank you for spending this time with me. I really appreciate you being here. I'll see you next Tuesday. Until then, take care of yourself and remember, you're doing better than you think.